All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. It is such a zechus, Baruch Hashem, to be back here with all. I mean, it's not a zechus to be back out of Eretz Yisrael, but it's such a zechus, Baruch Hashem, to be back here with all of you. Mamish, when I go away, two things that I miss tremendously. Number one, of course, is my family. I have to say that. I have to go on record as saying that. Right? But it's true. And Baruch Hashem, the ability to start the day with all of you, it's mamish the highlight of my day. And even though, again, I attempt to record this year and to give it virtually, but Lamaisa, nothing ever matches the ability to come in, to start the morning, to see such beautiful neshama, such smiling faces, to feel an energy of dvekos, she'ifos for greatness, Baruch Hashem. So it's so wonderful. It's unfortunate to be back in Chutz La'aretz, but it is wonderful, Baruch Hashem, to be back with all of you. So begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsor, our annual TALMUD TORAH sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shirman Tafshin Peheh zechus for besuros tovos for Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for Kislev, Josh and Becca Friedman, commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Josh's father, Yisroel Yehuda, HaRav Chaim Rephael, zechus livracha, and for the zechus, in the zechus, let's see for return of our hostages and the security of all of our precious soldiers. Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of their parents, Ludwig Stiefel, Yitzchak Laib ben Aharon HaKohen, Sarah Stiefel, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avraham, and Hinda Esterson, Hinda Bas Henech Efrayim, in memory of their dear friend, brave soldier, beloved husband and father, Naftali Gordon, Naftali Yonah Hy, Ben Beatrice, Miriam, and Daniel Yigal. We hope that in the merit of all of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families a nechama. And Meretz Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu should return all of our hostages, b'shalom and b'karov. Our precious soldiers should be successful, b'chol ma'aseh yadayim. And indeed, so much incredible to think about, like, there's always been such uncertainty. We felt such uncertainty for the last year. And of course, with all of the events in Syria, the uncertainty is even compounded. But what's incredible is you also feel in the air. You feel in the air. One of the most incredible things is you feel in the air in Eretz Yisrael, almost, sounds strange, almost like a certain euphoria. This fall of Syria and the recognition that like this axis of evil in the Middle East is crumbling. It opens the door for a profound feeling that something dramatic is about to occur. That something, the world is changing in ways that we never thought it would, and so rapidly, and so overwhelmingly. You know, they were showing the pictures of, there was some type of joint coordination between the United States and Israel about the destruction of all of Syria's weapons depot. Incredible. In the course of 48 hours, they wiped out over 80% of Syria's weaponry. Without Syria's air defenses, Iran becomes accessible. It's incredible just to see what's happening, and almost like a feeling like we live in an age of this footsteps of Mashiach. And in general, every day that goes by, we hear Mashiach coming a little bit closer, but you felt it. You felt it, to walk in and to feel like a confidence, as they say, like a ga'ava Yehudit, a Jewish, I don't know, it doesn't translate well as Jewish arrogance, right? But a little bit, it's okay. It's more than pride. It's a shtickle gaiva, a stolz, right? The Yiddish stolz. It's incredible, because the truth is, we were so beaten down, and we were so hurt, and we were so battered and so bruised, and to be able to feel that, such a tremendous zechus. So I'll say, let's begin. We have a lot to do. It's hard to believe that our love affair with Basra is winding down. Not over, but we're gonna. Sometimes you can't just be a one Masechta man, right? Sometimes you have to play the field a little bit. So Meretz Hashem, we're gonna have to. It's hard for us to settle down. So we're gonna Meretz Hashem be able to. But it is incredible to see that Meretz Hashem. We don't even have a full week left in Bava. So let's begin. Today's daf is Kuf Ayin Aleph. A really great Gemara today. Really great Gemara. My brisa. So we are picking up Kuf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, Kuf 171a. 2-4-6 lines down from the top. My brisa. So the Gemara says we quoted a brisa on Kuf Ayin Amud Beis. So remember again, we'll say, just to reorient ourselves a little bit. In our Mishnah, we had a very interesting three-way machlokes. Well, I say Mishnah and Gemara, we had a three-way machlokes. What was our machlokes? Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. Shimon paid back $500. So now we have a problem. What's our problem? So what do you do with the shtar? In other words, so now to say, we have a shtar that is inaccurate, because the shtar says that Shimon owes Ruvain $1,000, but in fact Shimon only owes Ruvain $500. So what do you do? So we have three machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah said, no problem, tear up the first shtar and write up a new shtar. Who's allowed to tear it up and write it up? Even witnesses. Rabbi Yossi says, no, leave the first shtar intact. Rather, what do? Write a shover, write a receipt. Shimon gets a receipt that he paid back $500, and that's it. Then we came to Rav Huna in the name of Rav in the Gemara, and Rav essentially agreed with Rabbi Yehuda in principle. Namely, we tear up the shtar, write a new one. What was their machlokes? The machlokes was, whereas Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says even Edom could do it, Rav said this could only be done in Beis Din. Only be done in Beis Din. And the Gemara said, if Rav had heard a brisa, would he have still held his position? Now the Gemara says, what's the brisa? My brisa, the Sanya. Here we go, the Sanya. Harisha hayu noshin bo elev zuz. I will say this is exactly our case. Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000. Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000. I'll also just mention we had a beautiful daf Yomi shir in Yerushalayim. So some of the chevra is on over here. You should just know one of the beautiful things. You guys don't get to see it because you don't have the Zoom screen in front of you. But I get to see the Heilige Chevra from Eretz Yisrael every day. And we had a beautiful shir in Yerushalayim HaKodesh on a rooftop, Wolaski's rooftop in the old city. It was it's actually warm in Yerushalayim. It was like 65 degrees. It was absolutely beautiful. But you should just know, you don't see them. But we have a beautiful chevra from Eretz Yisrael who's part of our shir every single day and are dedicated. Of course, I'm not going to lie, it's a lot easier to be dedicated at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. No offense, guys. I'm just saying, 1 o'clock in the afternoon than 5:45 in the morning, right? But Lamaisa, it's beautiful. Like we're part of something so much bigger that mamish spans the world. It spans the world and goes into Eretz Yisrael as well. Great zechus. Okay, in any event, the Mishnah says, the Brisa says as follows. Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000, right? And what happens? Shimon paid back 500 parmen chamish meos zuz. So what do you do? So now what do you do with the shtar? Se'edim mekarenes hashtar v'kosin lo shtar achar mizman rishon div Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no problem. Witnesses, tear up the first shtar and write a brand new shtar. Now, we'll say, there's a very important point. You might have made this point earlier as well, but it's important to reinforce it again. What do? You date, what's the date of the new document? What's the date of the new document? It's the original date of the transaction. And this is very important, right? Why? Because remember again, the date in the document creates what? Creates the lien and encumbrance on the properties of the borrower. So you don't want to redate that based on today, because then you've just effectively moved the lien to the present day. So we'll rewrite a new document. Now, what does the new document say? What does the new document say? Ruvain lent Shimon what? $500. But the date of that transaction, the date of that document, is the original date of the $1,000 loan. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says, no, shtar zeh yehimunach b'mkomo v'kasvu shover. Rabbi Yossi says, no, don't touch the original shtar. Don't touch the shtar. So what do? You write a receipt. Write a receipt that says that Shimon paid back Ruvain $500. So what you're going to essentially have over here, according to Rabbi Yossi, is two documents. What are the two documents? Number one is the original loan document. Who's holding the original loan document? Who's holding that? Ruvain the lender. So Ruvain the lender is holding a document. Now what does the document say? The document says that Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000. Okay, but that's not true. I mean, it is true, but Shimon paid back $500. So there's another document. What's the second document? A shover, a receipt. Who's holding the receipt? Shimon, borrower. And it says that Shimon paid back Ruvain $500. This is Rabbi Yossi's model. Why does Rabbi Yossi, remember again, so why does Rabbi Yossi hold this way? Here we go. Because Rabbi Yossi intuitively, right? Rabbi Yehuda makes more sense. Just rewrite the document. That seems to be the easiest thing. Why does Rabbi Yossi dafka want the receipt? And there are two reasons Rabbi Yossi says why I favor the writing of a receipt. Number one, achos, Kadeshi Yaakov Leparo. So I'll say, interestingly enough, because the existence of the original document is a motivation for Shimon to pay back. See, I both say, when you have a receipt, there's a danger. What's the danger? If Shimon loses that receipt, then what happens? Ruvain, the lender, has a document that says that Shimon owes him $1,000. And again, without the receipt, Shimon has no way to prove that he paid. I mean, I guess if he paid in front of witnesses, he could bring witnesses. But Lamaisa, that's the document. He has no way to go ahead and prove anything. So Rabbi Yossi says, I like it that way. You know why I like it that way? Because ultimately, again, it creates an urgency for the borrower to repay the lender. Rabbi Yossi says, I want to turn the screws. I want to turn up the pressure on the borrower. I want him to feel the urgency to repay. The other piece Rabbi Yossi says is, I want the original date to remain on the document. Right? Rabbi Yossi says, I want the original date because that original date, if we start rewriting documents, there's a concern about date confusion. I want the original date of the transaction to remain. This way, the encumbrance date remains as it originally was. One second. Rabbi Yehuda, now one second. Rabbi Yossi, calm down. Rabbi Yehuda, right? Now, remember, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? Rabbi Yehuda holds that when Shimon pays back $500, what do? Tear up the original document, rewrite it in a new document. But Rabbi Yehuda also agrees that you use the first date, the initial transaction date. So Rabbi Yossi makes it sound like he's the only one who wants to use the original date, but at the end of the day, Rabbi Yehuda also does. To which the Gemara says, no. This is what Rabbi Yossi was saying to Rabbi Yehuda. He was saying the following. He says, listen, imizman rishon ka'amrit, Rabbi Yehuda, if you agree with me that in your replacement document you will use the first date, then ultimately, again, we only argue about one thing. What's the one thing? That Rabbi Yehuda says we create the new shtar, and Rabbi Yossi says we write the receipt. The Gemara says, Im izman risha kamrit paligna alacha b'chado. Im izman sheni kamrit, Rabbi Yehuda, if you hold that in the new document you use a second date, the new date, then ultimately again, pagina alecha b'tarti. I'll argue with you on two things. Okay, so we'll say, so that's our brisa. So we'll say, remember again, so this is really, to me, I don't know why, this is very exciting. It's unusually exciting. And that if you think about this is really interesting because this happens all the time, right? Where someone owes, right? Reuven lends Shimon $1,000. Shimon pays back part of the debt. He's paying in installments, let's say. Lav dafka that it was an installment plan, but he has money now. He decides to pay back part of his debt. So what do you do with the document? A loan document. So again, just keep on remembering this. Fundamental machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda, tear up the old document, write up a new document. The new document says that Shimon owes Reuven $500, but use the original date of the transaction so as not to mess up the lien that was created on the borrower's possessions. Rabbi Yossi, absolutely not. Don't start with new dates, but rather just write a receipt. But 1 second, isn't the receipt going to be dangerous for the borrower? To which Rabbi Yossi says, yeah. We want the borrower to feel the urgency of paying back the money. So turn up the heat on him a little bit. Let him know that Reuven, the lender, has a document that says that Shimon still owes him $1,000. And that will create an urgency in repayment. Beautiful. All right, let's go back to it. Turn Rabbanon. So we'll say shtar. Now we're not finished yet. But the Gemara is going to go on a little bit of a detour. Turn Rabbanon. Shtar shezmano kasel b'Shabbos o ba'asara b'Tishrei. Shtar me'ucher hu v'kasher Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so we'll say this is fascinating. Let's say you have a document, right? And the document was dated not in accordance with the Jewish calendar, but rather with the secular calendar, right? Or some other secular dating system. And it turns out that when you look up, so I'll give you a good example of this, right? Next week, you find the shtar. Shtar says that Reuven lent Shimon money on December 14th. Now, there's only one problem with having a date December 14th, and that's what? It's Shabbos. Or you find the document that says Reuven lent Shimon money on, I think October 2nd. What was the problem with that? October 2nd was Rosh Hashanah. So now you have a date. Ultimately, again, I think it was David. Did you check that out? I think it was right. And of all the things to be bothered by in this year, that's the piece. Right? So Lamaisa, again. The point is, somebody's using an alternative dating system, and when you look back at the date, it doesn't make sense. Because the date is a date in which a transaction would not have occurred. No one's lending money on Shabbos. People are talking about money on Shabbos. That's a different discussion, right? But Lamaisa, no one's lending money on Shabbos, and no one's lending money on Rosh Hashanah. So now, Shaila is, what do you do with a transaction like that? So Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a problem. How do we understand it? It's a shtar mo'ocher. So Rabbi said this is very interesting. Shtar mo'ocher means a post-dated document. So this is very exciting because now we're going to talk about two different types of documents, a post-dated document and a predated document. Now, as we're going to see, the whole issue with predated and post-dated has to do with the creation of a lien on properties, right? Whenever you lend someone money, or for that matter, you sell property, there is an encumbrance that comes upon, if you're selling property, there's an encumbrance that comes upon the seller's property, right? I'm selling with achrayas. That's the assumption, right? Because we paskin achrayas tovos sofer, that every real estate transaction comes with a guarantee. That's essentially how we paskin halacha l'maisa. Or when Reuven lends money to Shimon, so Shimon is guaranteeing the debt with his property. So what we're going to see is as follows. So halacha l'maisa, when does the encumbrance start from? So bepashtos, the encumbrance, the lien begins on the date mentioned in the shtar. Here's the problem. If you post-date a shtar, then that's fine, right? As long as both parties are okay with the post-dating, that's not a problem, because no one gets hurt in post-dating, right? In other words, if the lender is okay with post-dating it, that means his encumbrance is not starting until 10 days after he actually made the loan. That's his business if he wants to accept that. Purchasers, people who will be purchasing property, they're also not put at a disadvantage if the encumbrance only starts 10 days later, because, hey, they're buying property without an encumbrance. So post-dated shtaros don't really pose a problem. Pre-dated shtaros do. Because what's going to happen? Essentially, with a predated shtar, you're creating an encumbrance before a lien, before the transaction. And that's problematic, because you can't create a lien which predates the transaction. The lien or the encumbrance ultimately is a result of the transaction itself. So a predated shtar we're going to see is going to be puzzle. A post-dated shtar is going to be kosher. We're going to see, by the way, that this actually has certain contemporary halachic ramifications as well. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is the second of the intermediate wide lines. So, for example, in places where they date their documents in accordance with the solar calendar, so they say the document was dated the 15th of December. And then when we check out, when we line up the secular date against the Hebrew date, it turns out that it was Shabbos, or it was Rosh Hashanah, Tani Yom Kippurim, or Yom Kippur. V'akol yodin shlo nechtav lo b'Shabbos o Kippurim, v'nimtza shlo nechtav ba'os yom hamochiach b'shtar, ela o muktam hu, o pasol, o mu'uchar v'kasher. So we'll say, so again, whenever you find a document, ultimately, again, that does not line up, the date that's used does not line up with a feasible date that this document could have actually been done, there's one of two possibilities. What are the two possibilities? Either predated or post-dated. So interestingly enough, Rabbi Yehuda says, I choose to understand that it's a post-dated document and therefore it's kosher. Rabbi Yossi, posel. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's puzzle. Why? Because apparently Rabbi Yossi assumes that it is a predated shtar. And therefore, halacha l'maisa is going to be possible. So let's analyze this. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yossi, v'halo maisa balafanecha b'tzipar v'echsharta. So listen to this. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yossi, this case came up before you in Tzipori. There was a case like this. Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. The document said the 14th of December. They looked back and they saw the 14th of December was a Shabbos. And the transaction definitely did not happen on a Shabbos. And yet Rabbi Yossi paskin that the shtar was kosher, which obviously meant Rabbi Yossi understood it to be a shtar mu'ochar, a post-dated document, and not a predated document. So the Gemara says, Amrlo, kechsharti bazeh hechsharti. Amrlo, kechsharti bazeh hechsharti. Rabbi Yossi says, no. At the end of the day, so if you look at the Rashbam says, Amrlo, kechsharti bazeh, it's about 7 lines off on the bottom. Shekasos bano b'shavos mekipurim kechsharti shemitocho mochiach shelo nichtav bizmano shari ein Yisroel kosvin shtaros b'shavos mekipurim v'akol yavinu shu me'ochar v'lo nafik minei chor v'kidel kaman aval b'me'ochar ba'alma shezmano kasav yom roi l'ksiva v'lo yodeh me'ochar hu. So Rabbi Yossi says like this. There are two cases, I will say. This is very interesting. Rabbi Yossi says there's two cases of date ambiguity. There's when the shtar has a date that we know for sure the shtar did not happen on this date. It did not happen on this date. Rabbi Yossi says, in that kind of case, I'm okay with saying that the shtar was a post-dated shtar, because that makes sense. People are doing the transaction now. They want to post-date it. So what do? They choose a date without recognizing that the date, let's say the secular date that they're choosing, lines up with the Shabbos. or lines up with Yom Kippur. So again, when it's clear that the date used in the shtar is not a date on which the transaction could have occurred, Rabbi Yossi holds, I hold that is kosher. But when it is a regular post-dated document, Rabbi Yossi says, I hold that it's possible. Now, we're going to see, Rabbi Yossi clearly has a concern about a post-dated document, which he has not fully articulated, which we're going to see in the Gemara to come. Okay, so if you just finish up the Rashbam says as follows. He says, "L'divrei hakol the dami k'misha kaso b'zmano shtar dinan d'chasinu lab b'zmanei v'chasvinu." Ela anan sadi. All right, actually, we'll just go to the Gemara. Fine. So let's go weiter. Now again, so we don't know. All we know is that Rabbi Yossi has an objection to a post-dated document. We don't know what his post-dated document. We don't know what his objection is, but we do know as follows: that when it's post-dated in a way that's clear that it's post-dated, even Rabbi Yossi will say that it's kosher. What's an example of a shtar that was post-dated in a way that's clear that's good that it's post-dated? When the date used is a date in which the transaction cannot have occurred. It was a Shabbos, it was Rosh Hashanah, it was Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yossi would agree that such a shtar is going to be kosher. Again, we don't understand why yet. That's just his shita. So let's go weiter. Vaha, Rabbi Yehuda nami bazeh kamar. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that even in that kind of case, right? Allah will be kosher. So Amar Vidas Hakomodim. Here we go. Shimhus kaklu la'onoso shel shtar. So we'll say everybody agrees in the following case. So right here we go. Reuven and Shimon $1,000. The date of the shtar is December 14th. Now, by the way, the date of the shtar is December 14th. And when we go ahead and we look at the date, we take out our Jewish calendar and we line it up with December 14th, right? And what happens? V'nim says onoso michuvenes b'Shabbos o ba'asara b'Tishrei. Right? And it turns out that December 14th was a Shabbos. Right? So it's clear that the date that was recorded in the shtar is not the actual date of the transaction. Everyone agrees, shishtar mo'ocharhu. Everyone agrees that it's a post-dated document, the kosher. Because I will say, remember, let's just play this out. A post-dated document, in reality, doesn't sound like it hurts anyone. Right? Because remember again, if Reuven is lending Shimon money, so what happens when Reuven lends Shimon's money? What occurs, I will say? So first of all, Shimon is obligated to pay him back. What else happens? Shimon's property becomes encumbered. Now, again, what does post-dating it do? It delays the encumbrance. Who does that hurt? Right? Really, the only person who hurts is the lender. And if the lender is willing to do that, fine. In other words, that's his choice. So because there's no foul, right? In other words, no one's hurt. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, as long as it's clear that it was post-dated. How do you have a case where it's clear that it's post-dated? The date that was used is clearly not the date in which the transaction occurred. Everyone will agree that it's kosher. Okay, Amud Beis. Lo nechleku ela b'shtar mu'ocher ba'alma. Okay, here we go. Shabbos say, where does the problem come up? The problem comes up what we call a shtar mu'ocher ba'alma, which means a post-dated document where it's not clear from the document that it was post-dated. What's an example of that? Take a look at the Rashbam. So we'll say, so again, where does this come up? This comes up in a case where, let's say, dated at December 13th. So I don't know, December 13th is a Friday. Right? Is that today? Sure. Yeah, December 13th is a Friday. Right? So Lamaisa, again, here, I don't know, did the transaction happen on December 13th? Didn't it happen on December 13th? I don't know. It's possible that it didn't. That's where the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is going to come up. Right? So we'll say, here we go. Let's get into it. It's so exciting. Rabbi Yehuda Tameh. So here we go. Get ready. And then we'll say, you're going to see how all of this comes together. So Rabbi Yehuda Tameh. Rabbi Yehuda goes into his reasoning. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? Da Amar Ein Kosvin Shover. Rabbi Yehuda holds, we do not write receipts. Now both say, why don't you write receipts? In other words, what does it mean you don't write receipts? So we've seen this already before in the last couple of days. Rabbi Yehuda goes, why don't we write receipts? Because receipts create an unfair burden upon the borrower. Right? Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen? The borrower now has to hold on to this document. So Rabbi Yehuda holds, you don't write receipts. Right? There's a loan document that was drafted. That's the document that we pay attention to, and we do not write receipts. Therefore, what? And therefore, again, there's no concern. So now watch this. Play this out. If you don't write receipts, then what happens when you go ahead and you repay your loan? What happens? Right? Reuben lent Shimon $1,000. Right? Now she wants to pay back. Shimon's not paying back until what? Till what? Till he gets that document. Right? In other words, if I'm Shimon, I'm not paying anything back until Reuven gives me back that loan document. What happens if Shimon wants to pay half? What happens if she wants to pay half? The Pashtus is not going to pay half, right? Why? Because paying half leaves him exposed. Because if he pays half, he's not getting a receipt. The document is still there, so it's not in Shimon's best interest to go ahead and pay half. So therefore, again, Rabbi Yehuda essentially says, there's no chicanery, right? Like, in other words, there's no trickery over here, because at the end of the day, even if the document is post-dated, so what? What are we concerned about? We're not writing receipts, which means that if Reuven has the document, it means that Shimon hasn't paid him back, right? And therefore, again, at the end of the day, Reuven can't. There's nothing bad that could come out of all of this. Rabbi Yossi, here we go. Rabbi Yossi holds that no, Kosin Shover. Rabbi Yossi says no, we do write receipts. And no, this could be exploited. This could absolutely be exploited. Rabbi Yossi, get ready for this. Now, we don't yet know, so I don't understand what could be exploited and how could a shtar mo'ucher be exploited. Just wait, because it is about to get crazy. We'll say, so now what the Gemara is doing is, this is one of these, the Gemara employs different styles at different times. What the Gemara is doing over here is something that, on one hand, is very methodical, but a little bit mystifying. Meaning what? The Gemara is outlining the positions, telling us what everyone holds in their respective positions, but we don't understand why they hold their respective positions. So here's what I know, right? So let's just go through what I know. What I know is, everyone agrees that a post-dated document that has a date, that is clearly a date in which the transaction could not have occurred, everyone agrees is kosher, nothing bad is going to happen as a result of that. What happens, halacha l'maisa, when it's a shtar mo'ucher, but the date could have been a date in which the transaction occurred. It was dated Friday, December 13th. So what maybe could have happened today? So Rabbi Yehuda says it's not a problem. Why? Because we don't write receipts, therefore shtar mo'ucher cannot cause a problem. Rabbi Yossi says we do write receipts, and therefore shtar mo'ucher can cause a problem. Now again, I will say the connection between receipts and shtar mo'ucher, the Yamar still has not explained. Hold on. So here we go. Even according to the opinion that says that we write a shover, that we write a receipt, hani mili apalgo. Furthermore, again, that's only a problem if you write receipts on part of the loan. Aval akula lo. Ba'akule lo. But for the entire amount, no. V'lohi, the Gemara says that's not true. Afilu akule kasvinon. We write receipts even for the entire amount of repayment. So apparently, in the world of receipts, there's machlokes. Do you write receipts only for partial payment? Or do you write receipts for entire payments? Okay, so that's apparently another machlokes. But the Gemara says, according to the opinion that says you write receipts, we even write receipts for the entire payment. Okay, hold on. Kihad Rab Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Havamasik Be'zuzei Rabbi Abba. Listen to this. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef lent money to Rabbi Abba. Also, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi, so they came before Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi, Amrle, Havli Zuzoi. So Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Abba said to Rabbi Abba, give me my money. Amrle, Havli Shtaroi, V'shakol Zuzach. So again, what happened? So Rabbi Abba was very smart. Rabbi Abba says, sure, I'll pay you, give me the loan document. In other words, you give me the document, I'll give you payment, because without the document, ultimately, again, the borrower is exposed. So Amrle, Ishtarcha Irkasli. That's interesting. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, I lost the shtar. Echtov l'cha tavra. But don't worry, I'll write for you a receipt. Amrle, HaRav Ushmuel Damit Harvayu, in Kosvin Shover. So he said, one second. So Rabbi Yitzchak said back, Rabbi Abba said back, but there's Rav and Shmuel. And Rav and Shmuel both hold that we do not write receipts. We don't write receipts. So we'll say this is incredible. So Rabbi Yitzchak responded and he said, Amar, man yohevle, first white line, man yohevle me'afrei de Rav Shmuel, raminon ba'inin. If only I would have of the dust in Rav and Shmuel to put in my eyes. That was saying, it's actually very beautiful. That ultimately, again, so what was happening was what's going to happen over here. The idea of putting the dust that Rav and Shmuel in my eyes was obviously a sign of incredible covet. Like, I'm not even the dust beneath the feet of Rav and Shmuel. If I would only have some of their dust to put in my eyes, I could see with such incredible clarity. But, listen to this, Rabbi Yitzchak said, HaRav Yochanan v'Harish Lakish, Da'amri tarvayu kosin shover. But as great as Rav and Shmuel were, Rav and Shmuel says you don't write a receipt, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish said you do write the receipt. So Rabbi Yitzchak was kind of back to Rabbi Abba. I will say, there's a tremendous Musar Hask in this. What was Rabbi Yitzchak doing? You see, Rabbi Abba quoted Rav and Shmuel that we don't write a receipt. Rabbi Yitzchak held differently. He held like Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish who said, you do write a receipt. But what did Rabbi Yitzchak do before he disagreed with the positions of Rav and Shmuel? What did he do? He built them up. In other words, he respected them. I say it is such a profound insight into the mechanism of disagreement. It's a disagreement with dignity. It's the ability to hold opposing views without diminishing the person who you're disagreeing with. Right? So I think we'd all agree that one of the greatest things that we have lost as a contemporary society is the ability to disagree agreeably or to disagree with dignity. Humanity has always had different opinions. And that's beautiful. I will say, one of the most beautiful things, Gemara, right? We learn Gemara every single day. And what is Gemara? I will say, can you imagine Gemara without disagreement? What would Gemara without disagreement be? I mean, like Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, like that's whatever, whatever. It'll take us 3 minutes. You did Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That's Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, right? It's interesting. Again, I will say, all of us love learning Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's fantastic, but you have to admit, the geschmack that you get from Gemara, you cannot replicate. You absolutely cannot replicate. And what's the excitement of it? The excitement of it is to see a variety of different opinions, but yet everyone lives on the same daf. Everyone lives on the same space. Everyone occupies the same Dalet Amos, the same Blat Gemara. Because one of the most important things in Yiddishkeit is the ability to disagree with dignity. And here, it's incredible. Rabbi Yitzchak, by the way, this is money, things tend to get heated around money. Rabbi Yitzchak is disagreeing with his borrower, with Rabbi Abba, right? And Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, I want to write you a receipt. Rabbi Abba says, no, Rabbi Shmuel says you can't write a receipt. So again, when sometimes you disagree with someone, there's such a Yitzhahara to attack their principles. Rabbi Shmuel, who Rabbi Shmuel? I got Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish. So what Rabbi Yitzchak does, no, Rabbi Shmuel, such Gedolei Hadar. If only I could put the dust of their feet in my eyes, how great life would be. But Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish hold differently. I say that's how you disagree. That's how a Yid disagrees, with dignity, with kavod, with a recognition that the other person is entitled to their point of view, even if they are absolutely wrong. Right? But l'maisa always with a dignity. Incredible. We write receipts from the stabra to kosin shover. I will say it would appear that l'maisa we write receipts. In kosin shover, because here's the problem. If you don't write receipts, then avad shtaro shalzeh yochol halo v'chadi. So I'll say, here's the issue, right? Imagine if you don't write the receipt. So I don't understand. So if we don't write a receipt, then halacha l'maisa again. So what should happen? So the lender should go ahead and lose the loan document, and that means the borrower never has to repay anything. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Sorry, just the opposite. That if the borrower goes ahead, right? If the borrower goes ahead and loses his shover, so that's it. The lender should be able to recollect again. So the Gemara says, "Maskif la'abaye." Abaye says, 1 second. Ve'elamai kosin shover. So now you think we should write a receipt. Avad shobro shalzeh yocha halav achadi. I will say, but that argument cuts both ways. Because what happens if you do write a receipt? Then what happens? What happens? We'll say. What happens if the borrower loses his receipt? What happens then? The lender could technically collect the entire face amount of the loan all over again. So the point Gemara is making over here is, you make it sound like by writing a receipt, no one's put at a disadvantage. But it's not true. When you write the receipt, just understand, receipts, and it's clear, receipts put the borrower at a disadvantage. Why? You'll say, Chas v'shalom, the borrower has documentary proof that he repaid part of the debt. No, why does it put him at a disadvantage? Because if you're writing a receipt, then what? The original loan document is still in existence. Which means that if the borrower loses his receipt, then Reuven has the ability to come after Shimon for the full $1,000. So the existence of a receipt, interestingly enough, as much as the receipt is documentary proof that the borrower paid back part of his debt, the existence of that document does put the borrower at risk. Should he lose that document, the lender has the ability to collect the entire face amount of the loan. Let's get ready for this. Amarle Rava, yes. It does put the borrower at a disadvantage. Why? Eved love liish malve. Closer from the pasuk, Mishnah Shlomo says another incredible piece of Solomonic wisdom: a borrower is a slave to the lender. That's the way it works. That's the way it works. The borrower is a slave to the lender, and therefore, again, I will say, you see this motif in halacha. We want the borrower to feel the heat. Want to feel the heat? Why? Because if you borrow money from someone, it is your achrayus to get it paid. It's your achrayus, and you should feel an urgency. And you should feel the pressure. Shlomo Melech says, now, Shlomo Melech was saying it a little bit differently. Shlomo Melech was saying, Eved Lova Li'ish Malveh means that literally when you borrow money from someone, you absolutely are beholden to them. That's literally what Shlomo Melech was saying. But on a deeper level, what Shlomo Melech was also saying is that we want the borrower to feel an urgency. We want the borrower to feel the pressure. We want him to feel the pressure. And we want him to go ahead and ultimately feel compelled that he's got to pay this back no matter what. So we're going to write a receipt. But 1 second. When he has a receipt, Nebuch, the borrower has to be careful not to lose it. Yeah, that's called being an adult. Be careful not to lose your stuff. Be careful not to lose your stuff. And if you do lose your stuff, suffer the repercussions. That's it. So I'll say, such profound Musar Haskell in this also. Which I will say, part of the beauty also about halacha, and this is very important, halacha is not a system that is designed to make people feel good, right? This is not DEI. This is halacha is a system. Halacha is a system that is designed for the proper functioning of society. And in any society, what do you have? You have haves and you have nots, right? You have people who have more, people who have less, and the people who have less are going to need the people who have more. And that's incredible. And the people who have more have a moral and legal obligation to help the people who have less. But the people who have less and have taken from the people who have more have to feel an urgency to come through on their commitments. Once they're going to make him feel bad, he's going to lose his stuff. That's not the goal here, right? The goal is to create a functional society. Think about this, especially in the Jewish loan market. Remember, in the Jewish loan market in general, not going to say you're operating at a disadvantage because Chas v'Shalom, the Rebbe Shalom created it this way, but you're not charging interest. Right? You're not charging ribbis. It's an Isra ribbis. Living inside a heter iska. You're not charging ribbis. So if you're not charging ribbis, the least that the borrower could do is ensure that the lender is going to get paid back in a timely fashion. And so if the borrower feels a greater urgency to do it, halacha says, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. We want the urgency to be there. It's not necessarily, there are times when it is about making people feel good, but in general, in the legal system, the idea is creating a functional society where everybody is there for each other and everybody is honoring their commitments. In order to do that, sometimes people have to feel the pressure to come through on their obligations. We want the borrower to feel an obligation to come through to the lender. I will say, just b'derech hashkaf also, if you think about it, this is so profound, because who's the greatest borrower in this world? Who's the greatest borrower? It's not one of us. Every day I wake up, and I have borrowed another everything I have is on loan from the Ribono Shel Olam. I open my eyes and I have eyesight, and Baruch Hashem, my legs work, and my arms work, and my heart is pumping, and all of these things. These aren't mine. I don't own these things. It's not like I did something to somehow acquire all of these gifts from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They are on loan from the Ribono Shel Olam. And says the Gemara, says Shlomo Melech, what is the relationship between a borrower and the lender? Shlomo Melech says it's very simple. A borrower is a slave to the lender, because the borrower owes everything to the lender. Without the lender, right? Without the lender, I wouldn't have my house, right? And without the lender, without a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the lender, I would not have my life. And I will say it is such an important hashkafic nuance for us to consider when we go through everything we have is on loan. Everything we have is on loan. And just like in any loan situation, there are going to be stipulations about how you use the borrowed money. Everything we have is on loan from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Baruch Shalom says, I'm happy to loan it to you. Use it wisely. Use it responsibly. Don't make foolish investments with the gifts I have given you. Because they both say one day the loan gets called. The loan gets called. After 120, the loan gets called. But the difference with this loan is that when I come before the Beis Din Shel Mala, I have to give an accounting about how the loan was used over 120 years. That's my avoda. How did you use my investment account? The Rebbe Shalom is interested on one thing. What's the ROI? Right? What's my return on investment? I lent you, I gave you all of this stuff. I gave you all of these abilities. Show me what I got for it. And as long as we could demonstrate a proper spiritual ROI, then that is a life well lived. But understand, everything we have is on loan, and the lender is always the borrower is always meshubed, is a slave mamish to the lender. Let's go back to Tan Hasam. So we'll say back to Shtar Mukdam U'achar. Incredible. So Tan Hasam. Shtar Yichov HaMukdam and Psul. So we'll say, remember again, I know you're wondering that, one second, we never explained the positions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi by Shtar Mukdam earlier. You're not wondering that. That was like 7 minutes ago. That's like 10 years in Daf Yomi world, right? We've been there. But we are coming back to this. What happened to the respective shittas by Shtar Mukdam? So here we go. Shtar Hasam. Shtar Yichov HaMukdam and Psulin. So we'll say if you predate loan documents, it's possible. We explain this. Why? Because remember again, if you predate, then what are you doing? You're backing up the encumbrance date early in the transaction. That's illegal. But post-dated documents are kosher. Look, here we go. So when do we say that predated documents are possible, post-dated documents are kosher? That's only by loan documents. By, I will say, sale documents. So if you're selling something, not loaning money, I'm selling something, even post-dated documents are problematic. My time, what's the reason for this? Zimnin. Watch this. So here's the concern. Here we go. Now we're getting into the kishkas of this. What's going to happen? I'm selling Reuven a piece of land in Nisan, but we post now it's Nisan, and ultimately again I'm selling the land. The date I'm putting in the document is Tishrei. So what happens? The Gemara says Tishrei. Now what happens? Now both say. Now in between. What ends up happening is I run into somebody, or I should say, I'm sorry. Let me go back. I sell Ruvain property in Nisan, but we dated Tishrei. And I was saying, I remember again, from the Gemara's perspective, there's only one reason you're selling land, and that's why. Why do they sell real estate times in the Gemara? You're poor. You need cash. So I'm selling land to Ruvain in Nisan because I need money. But we dated the document in Tishrei. Fine, so I sell him the land. Meanwhile, in Chodesh Av, I go ahead and I run into some money, and I go back and I repurchase my land from Ruvain. He doesn't have to sell it back to me, but he does sell it back to me. Right? So what happens? And I go back in Chodesh Av, and I buy back the property from Ruvain. And what happens? In Tishrei, Ruvain takes out a document. And what does the document say? That Silber sold me property in Tishrei. So let's see what just happened over here. I sold him the property in Nisan, but we dated the document in Tishrei. Meanwhile, in Chodesh Av, I ran into some money. I bought back my property. Fine, the property's mine. But now, Ruvain still has the shtar. And what does the shtar say? The shtar says that he bought property from me in Tishrei. He pulls out that shtar, and suddenly again, he could claim ownership of the property. So you see from here, you could exploit a post-dated document. If that's the case, I would say there should be a problem with loan documents as well. Because what could happen in loan documents? Watch this. The Yazif, Sigmar says, Zimnin, the Yazif bin Nisan. I lent Ruvain $1,000 in Nisan. And what happened? The custom started with Tishrei, but we posted the document for Tishrei. So now what happens? In between, right in Chodesh Av, Ruvain runs into some money, and he pays me back the debt. Uparale. And then in Av, Ruvain says, okay, Silber, I paid you back. Give me back the document. I'm so sorry, I lost the document. I didn't lose the document, I'm just holding on to it. So what happens? I write him a receipt. I have a receipt that says that he paid me back in Av. So a second, then what happens? Even though I wrote him a receipt, when Tishrei comes, what could I do? I could take out the document. What does the document say? That I lent Ruvain money in Tishrei. Ruvain say, 1 second, here's a receipt. I paid you back. No. You paid me back for an older debt. This is a brand new transaction. So you see that you could exploit a post-dated document, whether it's a transaction or whether it's a loan. Kasavar in kosin shover. So we'll say, it must be that he holds, we don't write a receipt. Then we'll say again, what's the godless of not writing receipts? What's the godless? The godless of not writing receipts is that the only way the borrower is paying back the loan is how? It's how? If he gets the loan document. And once he gets the loan document, there's no real fear of exploitation. Amar lei, Rav Yirmiyah Rav Kahana, Rav Yirmiyah Midif Rav Kahana, Idno, the kasinan shtari mu'chare, the kasinan tavra, amai kavdinan haki. So we'll say, but nowadays, we do write a shtar ma'ochar, right? The Gemara just points out, we do write a shtar ma'ochar, and we do write receipts. So how do we do this? So Basra Amalu Rabbi Avlu Safrei ki kasvinu shtar ma'ochar kasvu haki shtara dinan lo bizmane kasvinu ela achruna kasvinu. So we'll say this is incredible because listen to this. So Rabbi Abba would instruct this is simple. Rabbi Abba would instruct his scribes. Whenever a document is being post-dated, what do you do? Write that in the document. Just write it. Write in the document. This is a post-dated document. That's all. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. Va'idna. Telo kav dinan haki. Basra Amalei Rav Safra Safrei. Ki kasvinu hani tavrei. So we'll say, listen to this. But now we don't write that. For some reason, people don't write that into their shtaros. They don't write that line. Right? Make sure to write that this document was post-dated. So there's another eitzah. What's the other eitzah? Like Rav Safra would say to his scribes, Kikas visu hani tavrei, when you write receipts for people, iya de isu zimna dishtara kasvu kasvu ilo kasvu stama dechol imas dinafik l'raye. Supposed to listen to this. So if that's the case, so then what do you do with the receipt? If you know the date of the document, write the date of the document in the receipt. If you don't know the date of the document, then what? Leave the receipt undated. What's the great chap of leaving an undated receipt? That can be shown as proof of payment for whenever. One more piece, so I'll say then we'll stop. Top of Kuf Chaim days. But even contemporarily, so we'll say, so what happens? We don't end up writing in the document that this is a post-dated document, and we don't leave the date off. We don't leave the date off the receipts so that it can be used whenever. So the Gemara says, so Amali Rabbanan, Takune takine, man da avid, man da lo avid, iu da afsira nafshe. So essentially the Gemara says, but we don't avail ourselves of these opportunities now, so what should we do about a shtar ma'ochar? The Gemara says, listen, the system could help you to a certain point, but you also have to help yourself. If you take advantage of the opportunities or the remedies offered by Chazal, shkoyach. If you don't take advantage of those opportunities, we are not here to baby you. We are not here to do the work for you. We're giving you the possibilities. Write in the document that it's a post-dated document. Leave the date off the receipt. Do what you need to do to protect yourself. If you don't do that, then you leave yourself open to exploitation. That's not the system's fault, but instead that is going to be used error. So stop waiting for today. Shkoyach. All right, Chavra Zoom, have a great day, everyone, and a good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Reb Jerry was a great zechus to be sitting in that spot. Mamish. Meretz Hashem, the Karov again. Chavra, wonderful to learn with everyone there. Good Shabbos.